decision when they want to buy ice cream. I believe it's the most important point in this slide. And we use CDP, consumer decision process, and marketing research to explain this question. For the research, we use some easy questions to get the data for the consumer behavior or the lifestyle. But I know you all know what CDP and or the market research in this class. So I will just take some points to explain. Okay, who is consumer? We are. So let's think about what's the most important factor which influences you when you want to make a decision to buy ice cream. Look at this. Why did you choose the gray value? Because you can feel the force from the dark side. Oh, come on, you are not a Jedi from Walmart. So, how about this? You buy Haagen-Dazs because you believe you will get a sexy girl to be your girlfriend. When you buy Haagen-Dazs, yeah, you feel that's my dream, but it's impossible. So, what's the point? In my survey, it shows that most of people believe the taste is the most important factor. And it's important than price, brand, or something else. Especially price. Why? Because in economics, it tells us the price elasticity of demand is small. It means people is not sensitive on price. People are willing to pay more money to get a better product. That's why we choose gelato. Because gelato is the premier ice cream in this market. Well, it's sweet but light. Just like your first love. You know, but maybe not for everyone, because somebody's first love is terrible. So, yes, you got it. So, would you want to pay more money to get a feeling like your first love when you have ice cream? Well, I do believe you will too. But the first condition is you must have enough money. Because if you don't have enough, you cannot buy the gelato, and the staff in Walmart will just go back and you find a better job. So the income is the key point to help us to figure out what's our target market.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jay. That's got a tough cookie to follow. I am going to wrap up our presentation by doing the SWOT analysis and also looking at the marketing mix for the 4 Ps. Okay, so briefly, let's look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that Blue Bell faces if it wants to put this new gelato line out. Now, from a strength standpoint, let me ask, how many of you have been to the supermarket and have seen Blue Bell in the freezer? Anybody? Couple? I'm surprised it's not just more than, it's been around for a very long time. I'm a native Texan, and I've done Blue Bell for a very long time, so it's a very sizable force in the ice cream market in the deep south in the U.S., including Texas. And it garners anywhere from like 40 to 60% of market penetration in many areas throughout the south. So Blue Bell's brand equity is really one of its key strengths. Any frozen product it decides to put out, people know Blue Bell, and that's its equity. And that's really highly important. That likewise will play a role here as we put out gelato. Now, from a weakness standpoint, if you pull up Blue Bell's website, you will see very much what I call an Americana image. It's a small town country image, and that's something that Blue Bell has done sort of self-imposed. It intentionally puts forth a country, small town, deep south image to sell its ice cream. And that has sold them a lot of ice cream. It might not necessarily be the appropriate image for gelato, which is more international in flavor and flair. So that could be a potential weakness as you put out a gelato line. Opportunities, as Jay mentioned, gelato is a premium product. It commands high price, potentially high margins. That's a great chance to garner some additional margin in place of ice cream that hopefully has smaller margins. And finally, threats, as we've already shown you, there are already 2 gelato competitors on the market that are very strong, Ciabella and Talenti. Talenti is actually made here in Dallas. Ciabella is made at a facility up in Oregon on the west coast of the U.S. They already have a lot of market share throughout the U.S. They are formidable entities in this attempt to gain market share in gelato. And that didn't work, so we hit that button. So, from an SGP standpoint, we need to segment the market. As you already saw from those red circles, Blue Bell only services a about 20 states in the U.S., either in whole or in part. And it has a limited range because it owns its own distribution infrastructure, right? So the cold storage warehouses where it pulls ice cream from, and the trucks that deliver that ice cream from the factory all the way to the supermarket, Bluebell owns that whole infrastructure, right? So Bluebell employees actually, from the time the milk comes into manufacturing until that driver puts the cold carton of ice cream on the freezer shelf, that's all Bluebell employees. So they have a degree of vertical integration there, and they have a lot of control over the quality of their product, right? But that also limits where they can go with their product. So for that reason, we understand that, actually let's span through that, we understand that there would be, there are markets, for instance, in the West Coast and in the Northeast of the U.S. that would be great places to sell gelato, and our competitors do that. However, because we really cannot expand outside this red region, this is where we're going to focus on segmentation, right? And then we're also going to look at income, because again, gelato being a premium product, it's kind of expensive, high margins. We want to look at those areas initially for introduction that have household incomes that are more or less on the sort of high middle income to high income levels. Okay. Now, as regards targeting, Bluebell has 49 distribution centers throughout that red zone you just saw, right? Spread throughout. For targeting, we're going to look at the 10 top and rank them by revenue. Look at the top 10 by gross revenue as our initial starting point. And then also look at some demographics. Make sure within the zones that are serviced by those 10 distribution centers, make sure there's high income areas with high household income in those service areas. So again, the top 10 distribution centers will look for high income zones, and if that matches, we'll target those distribution zones as our target segments, right? So we're targeting chiefly geographically, but also ensuring that there's a lot of good wage earners in that area that can pay a lot for gelato. Now, from a positioning standpoint, again, this kind of goes back to what I talked about. Bluebell has a lot of brand equity, but they also have a sort of down-home country image. That doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with gelato. So for a positioning statement, you have to be kind of careful. So we put in things like fresh and creamy to create, into the texture of gelato. And European food was only like a toast of German thing. And again, that kind of goes back to that. It's kind of a blend European heritage, like gelato, Italian style ice cream. It's the fact that we come from the small Texas town called Brown. Okay. Now, getting into 4 P's, we look at our product. Now, you could, this gelato doesn't necessarily go really, really well with Bluebell ice cream. You could separate it, right? You could actually, we call this something by Bluebell. But if you do that, you put Bluebell in small letters, not really using all the brand equity that you could. People know the Bluebell name, what do they do that? It's a huge leveraging point for introducing a new product. So we decided it's best to go ahead and label this Bluebell in big letters so that people understand this is a Bluebell product. We also want to leverage that, again, that Italian heritage to gelato. So as a result, our flavors will be sort of Italian in nature. Things like Renaissance vanilla, Roman pistachio, Milano grease chocolate. Again, that kind of leverages off that Italian heritage. And then from a product packaging standpoint, again, we want to put Bluebell in big letters so people understand it's a Bluebell product. It'll be in a 1-pint container because gelato is, here in the U.S., is usually sold in these 1-pint containers. But again, we want to use some of that Italian flair, let the folks know that this is something a little bit different. So we're going to put the Italian flag colors across the rim at the top, green, red, and white. And also in some subtle imagery there, you'll see the Colosseum in Rome, as well as this Leaning Tower of Pisa. We're going to use this as a precedent when Bluebell introduced actually went into the Colorado market, which is where the Rocky Mountains are. They, again, do what I'm describing. They used the Bluebell name. They gave that geographic region a brand new flavor all on its own, but they also gave it a Rocky Mountain motif to let folks in that geographic region know, hey, this is something for you. This is something different. But they also kept the cow and the girl, which you see on pretty much any Bluebell package. It's got a dairy cow and a little girl reading it along. We will use the same. So people can recognize the package as being Bluebell. You'll see the dairy cow and the girl as well. Now, from a price standpoint, we're looking at pretty much $4.49, $4.99 per pint. That is in line with the competitors, Chabela and Talenti. And then from a place standpoint, again, as I mentioned, Bluebell already has this wonderful distribution center that it owns set up throughout the southern U.S. There's no reason to try to venture beyond that. It's expensive to do that because of the way they distribute their product. So we can stay in that region and focus on the places where it already sells ice cream. It goes to places like Kroger and Tom Thumbs. And we probably will not go into Walmart. Why? Because Walmart is sort of, it's not really where you find a lot of luxury premium products. So that probably is not a place you want to do gelato. But certainly the places like Tom Thumb and Kroger, conventional supermarkets, would be a great place to sell gelato, which is also where you'll find like Talenti, for instance. And then finally, from a promotion standpoint, there's not a huge need to do a lot of like advertising, right? Bluebell, because it has such huge brand equity, it'll kind of sell itself. So by word of mouth, we hope gelato will get going. Of course, these days, word of mouth doesn't just mean speaking. I mean, you've got Twitter and everything else today, so that's kind of a new electronic form of word of mouth. So we're really thinking that gelato will get going just by people talking about it. But in addition to that, we'll do conventional promotions like digital coupons on the website of Bluebell, and also maybe a bundling package where you do like a buy one ice cream, get a gelato free to get the introduction going so folks can really sample it and try it. Okay? That's essentially it. Since it's Italian in nature, gelato, I want to say grazie, thank you, and if you have any questions, I'm entertaining those now.